The red dust swirled around J1 Park's boots as he surveyed the endless rocky landscape of Kepler 452b. His environmental suit, a sleek silver protection against the harsh alien environment, seemed almost insignificant against the massive desolation surrounding him. The twin suns burned overhead, casting harsh shadows across the barren terrain. The Chiral research team had been stranded for 3 days. Their massive exploration vehicle lay broken, about a kilometer behind them. Its metallic hull, cracked and useless after a sudden geological shift, had caused a massive ground tremor. What remained of their equipment was scattered like broken toys across the rocky ground. Near the research team's makeshift camp, a group of small creatures huddled together. They weren't typical alien pets. These were Ilara, delicate beings with translucent skin that seemed to shimmer between blue and silver, depending on the light. Each Ilara was about the size of a small cat, with large eyes that reflected intelligence beyond simple animal consciousness. They moved with a grace that suggested deep emotional connection with their Chiral handlers. Hyun-Ki, the lead researcher, looked exhausted. His alien features, sharp angular lines and skin that shifted between grey and pale green, revealed growing concern. The Ilara were dying. Their bodies were becoming increasingly transparent, a sign of severe dehydration in their species. Each breath seemed labored, each movement slower than the last. Jae-won watched silently. He understood the situation was critical. The Chiral team had lost most of their water reserves during the vehicle's catastrophic breakdown. Their emergency systems had failed, leaving them exposed to the planet's brutal environmental conditions. The Ilara made soft, whimpering sounds. Their handlers, tough research scientists who had traveled across multiple star systems, looked helpless. Cultural protocols among the Chiral prevented direct emotional display, but their body language betrayed deep anxiety. One particularly weak Ilara, smaller than the others, collapsed. Its body almost transparent, pulse barely visible. The research team looked at each other, a silent acknowledgement of impending loss hanging in the air. Jae-won stepped forward. His movements were calm, calculated. He understood something the Chiral team did not, that life in any form was precious. The environmental suit systems were designed for extended survival, with multiple redundant water filtration mechanisms. The Chiral researchers watched, their alien eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Humans were still a relatively unknown species to them, their behaviors often unpredictable and difficult to comprehend. Wind continued to blow red dust across the landscape. Rocks of various sizes created a broken terrain that seemed designed to challenge any form of life. In the distance, geological formations suggested this planet had once contained water, perhaps millions of years ago. Hyun-Ki approached Jae-won, his movements slow and deliberate. Communication between humans and Chirals was complex, often relying more on gesture and intent than verbal language. But in this moment, something fundamental was about to change. The smallest Ilara continued to struggle, its breathing becoming more irregular. Its handlers looked defeated, accepting the inevitable. Loss! Cultural training prevented them from showing direct emotional attachment, but their body language suggested deep pain. Jae-won's hand moved towards his environmental suit's primary water reservoir. A simple action that would soon demonstrate something profound about human nature, a willingness to sacrifice personal safety for another living being's survival. The red dust continued to swirl. The twin suns continued to burn, and in this moment on a distant planet light years from Earth, a human was about to make a decision that would change everything. The story of survival was just beginning. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the narrative? The silence between Jae-won and the Chiral research team was thick with tension. Hyun-Ki studied the human with intense curiosity, his alien eyes blinking in a rhythmic pattern that suggested deep contemplation. The research team's communication systems had been damaged during their vehicle's breakdown, leaving them to rely on basic gestures and minimal translation technology. Jae-won's hand remained near his environmental suit's water reservoir. The smallest Ilara continued to struggle, its body now almost completely transparent. Its breathing was shallow, each breath a potential last. The other Ilara huddled close, their collective movement creating a soft, almost musical sound of distress. The planet's environment seemed to pulse with an oppressive heat. Rocks around them appeared to shimmer, creating mirages that danced at the edges of vision. In the distance, geological formations suggested ancient rivers long since disappeared, leaving behind a landscape of absolute desolation. Yun-Ki took a single step forward. His movement was deliberate, calculated. Among the Kiral, such an action carried significant meaning. It was a gesture of potential communication, of opening a dialogue without words. The research team watched. Some were skeptical, their body language suggesting resistance to whatever was about to happen. Others showed a mixture of hope and curiosity. The human's presence had already disrupted their understanding of survival protocols. Jaewon slowly removed a small container from his suit. It was a specialized water filtration unit, designed for extreme planetary exploration. The container gleamed under the twin suns, its surface reflecting light in sharp, precise angles. One of the younger Kiral researchers, a female named Ara, took an involuntary step forward. Her movement broke the careful formation of the research team. It was a breach of protocol, a moment of pure emotional response. The smallest Ilara made a soft sound. It was neither a cry nor a whimper, but something in between, a sound of pure vulnerability. The other Ilara responded, their bodies shifting closer together, creating a living protective circle around the weakest member. Yun-Ki's hand moved slightly. A communication device hanging from his suit flickered to life, producing a series of clicks and soft electronic sounds. It was an attempt to translate, to bridge the communication gap between human and Kiral. Survival, the device translated, the word emerging in a mechanical, emotionless tone. Possible? Jaewon's response was simple. He knelt down, bringing himself to the level of the struggling Ilara. His movement was slow, intentional. The research team tensed, unsure of what was about to happen. The smallest Ilara looked up. Its large eyes, previously dim and fading, seemed to focus with unexpected clarity. Something in the human's approach suggested safety, suggested hope. Ara took another step forward. Her movement was almost involuntary, a reaction born of curiosity and something deeper, a recognition of a potential moment of connection. The planet's wind picked up, carrying red dust in swirling patterns. It was as if the environment itself was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Jaewon's hand moved closer to the smallest Ilara. No sudden movements, no aggressive gestures, just a slow, careful approach that suggested understanding. Beyond simple species boundaries, Yun-Ki's communication device clicked again. Protocol, it translated. Interaction, forbidden. But protocols were about to be broken. In this moment, on this distant planet, something fundamental was changing. The boundaries between species, between survival and compassion, were becoming blurred. The smallest Ilara made another sound. This time it was different. Not a sound of pain, but a sound of recognition. The research team held their collective breath. Jaewon remained perfectly still. The twin suns continued to burn. And in this moment, first contact was happening. Not through grand technological exchanges, but through something far more fundamental. A simple act of potential survival. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the narrative? The moment hung suspended between action and possibility. Jaewon's water container gleamed under the harsh light of the twin suns. Around him, the Kiral research team watched with a mixture of confusion and growing anticipation. Yun-Ki's communication device crackled. Water, it translated, critical resource. The implication was clear. Every drop was precious in this harsh environment. Survival depended on careful conservation. Jaewon understood the unspoken challenge. His environmental suit contained precisely calculated water reserves, enough to sustain one human for several days in extreme conditions. Sharing meant risking his own survival. The smallest Ilara continued to struggle. Its body was now almost completely transparent, vital systems barely functioning. The other Ilara remained clustered around it, their collective movement creating a soft, rhythmic sound of distress. Ara, the young Kiral researcher, took another step forward. Her movement broke the careful formation of her team. Something in The humans' approach had awakened a deeper curiosity, a challenge to everything they understood about survival. J1's hands moved with careful precision. He began to disconnect the primary water filtration system from his suit. Each movement was deliberate, calculated. The Kiral researchers watched, their alien eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and growing understanding. The planet's environment seemed to pulse with heat. Rocks around them created shimmering mirages, dancing at the edges of vision. In the distance, geological formations suggested a landscape that had known water long ago, but no longer. Hyun-Ki's communication device clicked again. Impossible, it translated, but the tone suggested something else, a growing sense of uncertainty. One drop of water fell from J1's filtration container. It hit the rocky ground, creating a small dark circle against the red dust. The smallest, Elara seemed to respond, its breathing becoming slightly more regular. The research team's formation began to break. Cultural protocols that had defined their interactions for generations suddenly seemed less important. Something fundamental was changing. J1 began to divide the water carefully. Each movement was precise, calculated to maximize survival potential. He understood that this was more than a simple act of rescue. This was a moment of potential connection between species. The smallest Elara made a sound, something between a whimper and a recognition. Its large eyes, previously dim, seemed to focus with unexpected clarity. The other Elara responded, their bodies shifting to create a protective circle. Ara moved closer. Her hand reached out, then pulled back, a gesture of both curiosity and cultural restraint. The communication between species was happening beyond words, beyond traditional understanding. Hyun-Ki watched. His alien features, sharp angular lines, and skin that shifted between grey and pale green, revealed a growing internal conflict. Everything they understood about survival was being challenged in this moment. The water distribution continued. J1 moved between the Elara, ensuring each received a carefully measured amount. His environmental suit systems began to show warning signals, water reserves dropping rapidly. One of the older Kiral researchers stepped forward. His movement broke decades of cultural training. "Explain," his communication device translated, the word emerging in a mechanical tone that failed to capture the depth of emotion behind it. J1 did not stop. Each movement continued to be deliberate, focused on the survival of creatures not his own. The smallest Elara's body began to show signs of recovery, transparency giving way to a more solid form. The planet's wind picked up, carrying red dust in swirling patterns. It was as if the environment itself was watching, waiting to see the outcome of this unusual moment of interspecies interaction. Survival was no longer just about individual preservation. Something more fundamental was happening, a demonstration of compassion that transcended species boundaries. The first true moment of connection was unfolding. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the narrative? The next few hours brought a remarkable transformation. The smallest Elara, once on the brink of death, now moved with renewed energy. Its translucent body had regained a soft blue-silver color, and its movements became more deliberate. Hyun-Ki watched J1 with growing fascination. The human had sacrificed nearly 70% of his water reserves, a decision that defied every survival protocol the Kiral researchers understood. Their species valued individual survival above all else, viewing compassion as a potential weakness. Ara approached J1 cautiously. Her communication device translated her limited understanding. Why? The simple question carried layers of complex cultural confusion. The Elara behaved differently now. They moved around J1 in a circular pattern, their large eyes constantly watching him. It was more than gratitude, it seemed like a form of recognition. The small creatures understood something profound had occurred. The planet's harsh environment continued to challenge them. Twin suns burned overhead, creating temperatures that would kill most living beings within hours. Rocks around them seemed to absorb and reflect heat, creating a natural oven-like environment. J1's environmental suit began sending critical warnings. Water reserves were dangerously low. Oxygen recycling systems showed increased strain. Yet he remained calm, his movements calculated and controlled. Yunqi's communication device began producing more complex translations. Survival, it said. Not individual. Survival collective. The words suggested a profound shift in understanding. The research team's formation had completely broken. Cultural barriers that had existed for generations were crumbling. They watched, the human with a mixture of confusion, respect, and growing admiration. One of the older researchers, a male named Kiro, stepped forward. His movements suggested internal conflict. Everything they understood about interspecies interaction was being challenged in this moment. The Alara continued their circular movement around J1. They seemed to be communicating something among themselves, a complex language of movement and subtle body signals that the humans and Kirils could not fully understand. Ara's communication device produced another translation. Sacrifice, it said, the word emerging with unexpected emotional depth. The concept was new to their species, a revolutionary understanding of survival. J1's oxygen levels continued to drop. His suit's emergency systems began to activate, creating a soft warning sound that cut through the planetary silence. He remained focused, watching the Alara's recovery. The smallest Alara approached J1 directly. Its movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial. It stopped just inches from his environmental suit, its large eyes looking directly into the suit's protective visor. Kiro's communication device produced another translation. Impossible, it said, then quickly added, unexpected. The word suggested a profound moment of cultural realization. The planetary wind picked up, carrying red dust in complex patterns. It was as if the environment itself was witnessing something extraordinary, a moment of connection that transcended species boundaries. Yunqi moved closer to J1. His movement broke every previous protocol of their research mission. Something fundamental had changed in their understanding of survival, of compassion, of life itself. The Alara continued their circular dance. They seemed to be creating a protective formation around J1, their small bodies moving with unexpected precision and purpose. Ara's communication device produced one final translation. Understanding, it said, the word carrying a weight of emotional complexity that went far beyond simple language. In this moment, on this distant planet, something remarkable was happening. The boundaries between species were dissolving. Survival was no longer about individual preservation, but about something far more profound. A new form of connection was being born. Would you like me to continue with the final part of the narrative? The communication ship arrived 3 standard planetary cycles later. Its massive hull cast a shadow across the red rocky landscape, disrupting the endless patterns of dust and stone that had defined the environment for millennia. J1 sat surrounded by the Chiral research team. His environmental suit was damaged, oxygen reserves critically low. The Alara remained close, their small bodies creating a protective circle around him. Something had fundamentally changed during their shared survival experience. Yunqi approached. The communication officers, his body language different from standard Chiral protocols, where once he would have delivered a strict formal report, now his movements suggested something more complex, a sense of profound understanding. Unexpected interaction, his communication device translated. The words carried layers of meaning that traditional scientific language could not capture. The research team's initial mission had transformed into something entirely different. The smallest Alara, now fully recovered, moved with surprising grace. Its connection with J1 was evident. When he shifted position, the creature would adjust its own location, maintaining a constant proximity that suggested more than simple survival instinct. Ara documented everything. Her research logs were no longer just scientific observations. They captured something deeper, a moment of interspecies connection that challenged everything their civilization understood about communication and survival. Rescue protocols typically involved minimal interaction. But this mission had become something extraordinary. The Chiral officers who arrived looked confused, their understanding challenged by the scene before them. J1's oxygen levels continued to drop, yet he remained calm. The Alara seemed to sense his physical strain, moving closer, their collective body heat providing unexpected support. One of the senior communication officers approached Hyun-ki. "Report," the device translated, expecting a standard scientific summary. What they received was something entirely different. The planetary winds continued to blow. Red dust created complex patterns around them, as if the planet itself was witnessing this moment of transformation. Geological formations in the distance seemed to watch silently. Kiro began explaining the events. His communication became less mechanical, more emotional. He described J1's actions not as a scientific observation, but as a profound moment of compassion. The Alara demonstrated behaviors never before recorded. They moved in synchronized patterns, creating complex communication signals that suggested a level of intelligence far beyond previous scientific understanding. Rescue protocols suggested immediate medical evaluation and separation. But something had changed. The boundaries between research subjects, between species, had become blurred. J1's environmental suit continued sending critical warnings. His oxygen levels were dangerously low. Yet he remained focused. His attention on the Kiral team and their Ilara companions. The communication ship's officers began their standard documentation process, but their questions became different. No longer were they asking about scientific observations. They were asking about understanding, about connection. Ara's research logs would become legendary. They documented not just a survival experience, but a moment of profound interspecies communication. Her recordings suggested something revolutionary, that survival was more than individual preservation. The smallest, Ilara, approached the new arrivals. Its movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial. It carried with it a new understanding, a bridge between different forms of intelligent life. Hyun-ki looked different. His sharp alien features now carried something unexpected, a sense of emotional complexity that transcended scientific training. He had witnessed something profound. The planetary environment seemed to pause. Twin suns continued to burn overhead, but something had changed. The landscape that had seemed hostile now felt like a witness to an extraordinary moment of connection. J1's final act of sacrifice had transformed an impossible survival situation into something much larger. It was no longer about a human, saving alien creatures. It was about understanding, about connection. A new chapter of interstellar communication was beginning. Would you like me to elaborate on any part of this narrative?